"Dad, you must come spend Christmas with us," David said, like we'd just seen each other last month, like the silence hadn't carved out half my life. 15 years. That's how long it had been since my son last spoke to me. Not a word since the day we lowered his mother into the ground. No birthday cards, no calls, not even a damned forwarded meme. But now he missed me. Now, with my name trending in business journals, suddenly I was family again. David had read about the sale, I'm sure of it. $30 million. My company, my life's work, sold clean and smart. The ink barely dried, and his voice was back in my ear like it had been waiting for the right number to show up in my account. "I've been meaning to call for years," he said. I let him talk. I wanted to hear the performance. Melissa even chimed in, cheerful as a songbird, telling me how much the grandkids missed Grandpa. Grandkids I'd never met. I sat at the kitchen table, the same one Caroline and I picked out 30 years ago, and stared at my half-finished supper. I'd reheated turkey. Again. David didn't know that, of course. Didn't know how many Christmases I'd spent alone at that table. Didn't ask. "I hope you'll come," he said. It would mean the world to us. It wasn't the words that got me. It was how smoothly they came. Like a man tossing rope across water, expecting I'd grab it just because it was there. I said I'd think about it. Hung up. Sat there for a long time. The clock ticked loud. The turkey got cold. And then I laughed. Not the kind that comes from your belly. The kind that hits your throat like splinters. Because I remembered something. A year after Caroline died, I wrote David a letter. Nothing dramatic. Just a few lines about missing him. I got it back unopened. Stamped. Returned to sender. I thought of that envelope now. Still tucked in the drawer of my study. I'd kept it all these years. Like an idiot. But not anymore. Because I wasn't the same man who sent that letter. I wasn't the man who hoped for crumbs. David wanted me at his Christmas table now? Let's see what he does when he thinks I've got nothing left to offer. I hadn't realized how quiet my house was until I heard David's voice in it again. Even through the phone, it echoed down the hall like a ghost that didn't belong anymore. 15 years of silence changes a man. Not all at once, but in the way you eat, how you fill your time, what you say out loud, and what you just think to yourself. The first Christmas alone was the worst. I cooked a full dinner anyway. Roasted turkey, green beans, even Caroline's sweet potato pie. Thought maybe if I kept the tradition alive, the rest might follow. It didn't. I sat at the long dining table with 3 empty chairs and a pie that never got cut. The turkey went into the freezer in labeled containers. I ate it for weeks. After that, I stopped pretending. Thanksgiving became a sandwich. Christmas, a frozen dinner. No lights. No music. No tree. Just the soft hum of the refrigerator and the steady drip of the coffee pot in the morning. There's a kind of dignity in solitude, I told myself. I'd lived alone before Caroline. I could do it again. But that wasn't true. Back then, alone meant freedom. Now, it meant absence. A silence that had shape and weight and temperature. The lake house still had her touch. I'd drive up some weekends, fix what needed fixing. She loved that place. The way the light hit the water, the smell of pine after a storm. We used to sit out on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the ripples stretch to the edge of the lake. After she died, I kept it clean, kept it stocked, like she might walk in again and ask what I was cooking. David never came up after the funeral. Never asked to. I remember once, maybe 4 years ago, I mailed him a photo from the lake house. Just the porch at sunset. Nothing sentimental. Just a "thought you'd like this" message. No reply. That's the kind of quiet that teaches you how to stop expecting. So I built a life where I didn't need the noise. Books, old westerns on Sunday afternoons, projects in the garage. I restained the porch, rebuilt the garden fence, even made Caroline's old rocking chair sturdy again. There's satisfaction in fixing things. The trick is accepting that some things, like people, don't want fixing. I stopped talking about David after year 10. When folks asked, I just smiled and said he was busy, raising a family, living his life, and I meant it, in the way you mean something you've told yourself enough times that it becomes a substitute for truth. So when the phone rang and it was him, it didn't just rattle me, it insulted everything I'd learned to live without. He spoke like he'd just stepped out for cigarettes. "Dad, it's been too long." Yeah, it had. But I wasn't the same man who sat at the table with untouched pie and hope hardening in his chest. Now I had routines. I had quiet. I had peace, even if it was a lonely kind. And if David thought he could just waltz back in because I had money now, he didn't understand the kind of silence he'd taught me to live with. I knew something was wrong the moment Melissa messaged me. Not called, messaged. A bubbly text with emojis, like we were old pals planning brunch. "Hi Dad, we were just talking about you. The kids miss their grandpa. Can we please host Christmas this year? We'd love to reconnect." I stared at the screen for a while, wondering what twisted lottery had drawn her name back into my phone. I hadn't heard from either of them in a decade and a half. Not a birthday. Not even a condolence card when my dog died. Now suddenly, I'm Dad again? The same woman who once told me I was a bit much for their kids. I almost laughed. But then another message came through. This one from David. Longer. Polished. "Hey, Pop. I know it's been too long. We'd really love to see you this Christmas. Things have changed. The kids are older now. They've been asking about you. Let's start fresh." Start fresh. As if everything before this was just spilled coffee. We could wipe off the counter. 2 days earlier, I'd been on the cover of a business journal. They called me the quiet builder who sold big. $30 million for a company I built with my hands and spine. It was a good deal. Not life-changing. Life-securing. Enough to breathe. The article made the rounds. Old coworkers sent emails. Old flames I hadn't heard from since Reagan was in office sent, "How are you?" messages. But it was David's timing that made my skin itch. 15 years of nothing. Then, 2 days after that article, I'm suddenly Grandpa of the Year? Melissa sent photos next. Kids I'd never met, posing by a tree I'd never decorated. The boy had my eyes. The girl had Caroline's smile. I should have felt something. Instead, I felt watched. Weighed. They weren't reaching out. They were circling. The next call came while I was in the garage. "Dad," David said, "we've got a great Christmas planned. I know we've had our distance, but this is a new chapter. We want you here. The kids have so many questions." Questions like what? Why I disappeared. He was the one who vanished. But I didn't argue. I said I'd think about it. Because that's what you do when someone starts acting like a friend after 15 years of silence. You don't answer the question. You figure out what they really want. And I already had a hunch. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't connection. It damn sure wasn't love. It was access. They saw the number. 30 million. They saw me not as a man, not as a father, but as an unlocked vault. They thought I was flattered. They had no idea I was planning a test. After the second round of cheerful texts and photos, I called my lawyer. Not to make a will. Not yet. I called to plant a seed. "Mr. O'Donnell," I said, "I need to disappear. Financially, at least." There was a pause on the line. Then a slow chuckle. "I take it congratulations are in order?" "They are," I said, "but I want to test something." "Ah," he replied. "Family reaching out again?" Like clockwork. He didn't ask for details. He knew enough. He'd seen clients like me, men who'd paid their dues in sweat, who got silence in return until there was something worth inheriting. He met me the next morning. We sat in my study, same place where I used to watch late-night news with Caroline. The fire was low. A cup of untouched coffee steamed beside me. "I want it to look real," I said. "Bankruptcy, a failed reinvestment, a modest pension, and maybe some back taxes." Mr. O'Donnell nodded, already scribbling on his legal pad. "We'll spread the word slowly, enough for it to feel accidental. And no trace of the sale. I want my name off every celebration article." We drafted the narrative carefully. A quiet retiree who got caught up in a bad market play. A man too proud to ask for help. A few trusted friends would be told, in confidence. enough to let the rumor drip into the places it needed to reach. By the time I walked him out to his car, I felt lighter. I'd spent 15 years trying to earn my way back into my son's life. Now I wanted the truth, and to get it, I needed to make sure they thought I had nothing left. 3 days later, Melissa posted on Facebook about the importance of loving family no matter what they can give. That same night, I got a short text from David. "Hey Dad, some changes came up. Christmas might be tight. Rain check?" No apology, no shame. Just a schedule update, like I was a dentist appointment he didn't feel like keeping. And that was the tell. When I was rich, they set the table. When I was broke, they vanished. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about money. This was about who I was allowed to be in their life. Rich? I was family. Broke? I was an inconvenience. And now I was awake. They'd made their move. It was my turn. 3 days after I lost everything, Christmas was officially canceled. David's message was short, tidy, efficient. "Sorry, Dad, things are complicated this year. We'll plan something soon." Not what happened, not how are you holding up. Just a clean erasure. Like I'd never been invited. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. The test had already worked. All it took was the suggestion, the whisper, that I had no more money. And suddenly, I wasn't worth a chair at their table. It was like watching a magic trick in reverse. The smiles disappeared. The warm texts dried up. Melissa unfollowed me the next morning, not even subtle about it. Just gone. The shift wasn't gradual. It was surgical. 1 week ago, I was grandpa, father, friend. Now I was just a man with bad luck. I didn't tell them I was fine. Didn't correct the rumors. Didn't rush in to say, "Hey, it's all fake, I'm actually doing great." Because I needed to see who they were when they thought I had nothing. And I saw it. Saw the distance they put between themselves and anything that didn't benefit them. I'd been foolish before. Let love blind me. Told myself, they're just busy. They're building a life. They'll come around. No, they wouldn't. Not unless there was something to take. I sat at the lake house that weekend, fire going, a plate of leftovers by my side. The same meal I would have eaten at their house, except now it was quiet, honest, no pretense. I watched the snow fall and thought about Caroline. She would have been furious. She always said, "Love without respect isn't love." I didn't fully understand that until now. Because David didn't just pull away. He didn't just grow up and get busy. He waited for me to be useful again. He reached out not because he missed me, but because he thought I was worth something again. And when I wasn't, he dropped me like a bad investment. But that's the thing about playing poor when you're not. You see people's true currency. And David's? It wasn't love. It was leverage. He thought I was back in the dirt, that I had no options, that I'd crawl back with hands open if he just stayed quiet long enough. But he'd forgotten who raised him. I built a business with less than what I had now. And if he thought being cut off made me powerless, he was about to learn just how sharp a man can be when he stops hoping for scraps and starts sharpening his tools. David canceling Christmas didn't break me. It clarified me. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't hoping for something. I wasn't wondering what I did wrong. I wasn't waiting by the phone. I was done. No more guessing. No more giving the benefit of the doubt. No more playing the long-suffering father hoping his son would come back. That man was buried with the turkey I didn't cook. Now I had a purpose. End the games. Permanently. Not with drama. Not with some sentimental plea. That had never worked. No. This needed to be precise. Legal. Quiet. Irrefutable. I opened a new file on my computer and labeled it simply, Closure. Inside it, I began collecting. Every transaction I'd funded over the years. The wedding. The down payment. The new car. The condo upgrade. The second car. The school tuition I'd co-signed. The small emergency loan that turned into $20,000. Each one had a paper trail. Each one, a signature, a transfer, a receipt. I scanned them, organized them by year, and highlighted what mattered. My generosity. But this wasn't about getting paid back. This was about building a profile of a man who gave and a son who took. I called Mr. O'Donnell the next morning. I want to do it right, I told him. You want to cut him off legally? He asked. No, I said. I want to make sure when this blows, he can't say I ambushed him. Transparency? No, I smiled. Documentation. He understood immediately. We began creating a chain of evidence that I had offered support freely, but also that I was now withdrawing it, that no one had claim to my assets, that the stories being whispered about me being broke had never been corrected by me. David had made his decision based on a lie. Now I wanted to see what he would do when he realized that lie cost him everything. But it couldn't be fast. Revenge is a reaction. This was resolution. A reckoning. I wasn't going to shout at him. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to make sure the next time he looked at me, he understood what he traded. Because love without respect is leverage. And I was done being leveraged. From here on out, every move I made would have one purpose: to make sure that when David thought of me, he didn't think of warmth or softness or someone to tap for favors. He would think of silence, steel, consequences. And by the end of it all, when Christmas rolled around, I'd be the one holding the invitation, and he'd be the one wondering what it cost to open it. The first crack came from someone who didn't owe me anything. Old business contact. Name's not important, but he built condos in the early 2000s and owed me a favor from a zoning deal I helped push through. He called one evening out of nowhere. Saw your name in that Forbes piece. 30 mil, huh? I smiled. You know how articles stretch the truth. Yeah, well, I figured. But that's not why I'm calling. There was a pause. The kind that says, something's coming. You know your son's running a construction outfit out of Chandler? I didn't. I didn't know anything about David's life, beyond the curated photos and his sudden concern for holiday cheer. Well, he continued, he's been putting out some fires. Rumors about debts. He pitched us for a drywall contract last year. Said he had capital backing. I asked who. He named you. My coffee went cold in my hand. He used my name? Not on paper, he said quickly. Just implied. Enough that I walked. Didn't smell right. Thought you'd want to know. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I got to work. I still had access to some industry tools, old portals, databases. Most folks don't realize how much stays public, if you know where to look. David's company had a glossy website, all right? Drone shots, slick branding, some testimonials from realtors probably paid in gift cards. But the filings told another story. Shell companies, at least 3. Delayed payments, subcontractor complaints, a lawsuit filed by a lumber supplier, quietly dropped, and a large personal loan, not business, from a private lender known for high-interest arrangements that turn friendly until they're not. Then I found it. The first breadcrumb that told me this wasn't just about neglect or greed, it was desperation. David wasn't doing well. He was fronting. And now I knew why Christmas mattered. If I showed up, if I looked happy and healthy and publicly generous, it would fix everything. He'd leverage my presence for credibility. Probably already had deals lined up. Dad's coming over for the holidays. Everything's fine. Except it wasn't. And now that the broke narrative had spread, he'd scrambled, pulled back the invite, hoped it would all blow over. I could have ended it there. I could have called him out. But I wanted more. I didn't want to scold him. I wanted to understand the full shape of his lie, how deep it ran, who else he'd manipulated, and more importantly, who else I could talk to. Because a man like David doesn't stop at casual deceit, he scales it. And if he thought I was just the old man he used to manipulate, he was about to learn just how thorough I could be when I started pulling threads. The archives smelled like paper and dust and arrogance. I hadn't stepped foot in the county records office in nearly a decade. Last time was for a zoning appeal Caroline and I filed together, back when the city tried to reroute traffic through our old street. But I remembered the layout, still knew the way bureaucracy wrapped around itself like ivy. The young man at the counter barely glanced up. You looking for a title search or lien records? Construction licenses, I said. And any legal filings on businesses connected to the name David Reeves. He typed slowly, chewing gum, bored before the search even started. "I can only give you what's public," he said. "That's all I need." 10 minutes later, I was buried in microfilm and PDF scans on a borrowed terminal. David hadn't just been sloppy. He'd been arrogant. Permits pulled in different names, sometimes overlapping timelines. A shell game with addresses. One company opened, filed one contract, then dissolved. Another popped up under Melissa's maiden name, listed her as CFO. No licenses for electrical or plumbing. No certified subs listed, just in-house labor. And the taxes, Jesus, late filings, penalties, notices of assessment. One lien already placed by the state. Small, but enough to show pattern. I printed everything. The woman at the copy machine eyed the stack and raised her brow. "Big project?" "Yeah," I said. "Family home renovation." Outside, the air smelled sharp. Desert wind and exhaust. I sat in my truck with the heater off, hands resting on the warm stack of paper. Each sheet was proof. Not just that he was lying, but that he was drowning and didn't know how to swim, and I'd just found the rope he thought he could climb. On the drive home, I stopped by O'Donnell's office and dropped the folder on his desk. "This is the foundation," I said. "Now let's start building." He whistled low. "Your son really tried to ride your name into the ground, didn't he?" "Not anymore." We mapped out the next steps. Legal safeguards, asset protections, a timeline to bring the documents forward. Not publicly, not yet, but enough to let them simmer. "Let them sweat a little," I said. "Then we'll decide where to turn up the heat." And for the first time since Caroline passed, I felt like I was moving again, not just surviving. Because men like David, they think the old man won't fight back. They forget who taught them how to stand in the first place. Melissa called me. Not David, Melissa. That was the first sign the storm was coming. Her number popped up while I was organizing the receipts. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity? It gets the better of you when you know someone thinks they still have leverage. "Hi, Dad," she said, voice like sweet tea left out in the sun too long. "I was just thinking about you." "No, you weren't," I said, flat. There was a pause, just long enough to catch her recalibrating. "We're really concerned," she continued. "David's under so much pressure right now. The business, the economy, it's all piling up. I know he hasn't said it, but he's hurting." I said nothing. Let her keep going. "We just thought, well, if you could step in, even just temporarily. You've always been so generous. This doesn't have to be a big deal." There it was, wrapped in fake empathy, folded into the word temporary. Like she hadn't spent 15 years pretending I was dead until the stock sale headline hit. "What do you want, Melissa?" I asked. She sighed. "Real this time. Less honey, more vinegar." "They're going to start pulling permits," she said. "If David doesn't pay off certain vendors by the end of the quarter, the whole operation could stall. That affects the crews, the clients. People are counting on him. I'm not." Her voice got sharper. "He's your son. You made it clear I was just a liability. That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is showing up when the money's back and calling it love." She dropped the niceties. "You know what? I tried. I told David you'd come around. I told him the holidays meant something to you, but I guess I was wrong." "You are," I said. "You were wrong when you talked him into shutting me out, and you're wrong now thinking I'd bankroll the fire you helped light. We're family." "No, Melissa. You're the woman who took my son and taught him to measure love in dollars." That did it. I heard it. The mask slip. Just a flicker. "You'll regret this," she said. "They all do. Eventually." "They?" "All the fathers who thought silence meant power." I smiled, just a little. "You think I'm being quiet? Because I'm weak?" A beat. She didn't answer. "Let me give you a free gift, Melissa," I said, calm as ice. "You should have stayed out of it." Then I hung up, stood in my office for a while, just breathing. She'd called, not to plead, but to warn. They knew something was coming. They just didn't know when, or how bad it would be. That's the problem with manipulators. They never expect the quiet ones to play offense. They think they're still in control. Right up until the moment the ground gives way beneath them. I sat in the garage, binder on my lap, watching the space heater glow in the dark like a coal that wouldn't die. Page after page, I flipped through the mess. Not out of shock anymore. That part was gone. This was just confirmation now. Like watching the playback of a game you already lost, but still wanting to know how. The truth hit me somewhere between a luxury watch bought with company funds and a $9,000 payout labeled consultant fee sent directly to Melissa's mother. They weren't just greedy, they were reckless. And not the kind of reckless you grow out of, the kind you breed in private, then justify in public. The kind that wears designer clothes to bankruptcy court. David wasn't running a business, he was running a funnel. From my name, to fake credit, to borrowed clout, to whoever would nod and write a check. And Melissa? She wasn't just going along with it. She was co-piloting. There it was in her own email, buried in a PDF, flagged during a data search. If your dad shows up, pivot. Talk about the grandkids. Keep it emotional. If, pivot. Like I was a variable in a pitch deck. Not a person. Not a father. They were rehearsing how to manipulate me. Strategizing my emotions like assets. That's when I closed the binder. Not because I couldn't take more, but because I didn't need more. The line had been drawn. It was never about healing. It was never about the grandkids. They didn't miss me. They missed what I could fund. And when the well looked dry, they didn't try to protect me. They tried to distance themselves before the loss became a liability. They'd have let me rot in my empty house. They already had. 15 Christmases alone. 15 birthdays forgotten. While they played house on money, I'd hand it over without conditions. I stood in the garage, stared at the old Harley I never finished rebuilding. Caroline had always said it would be my project for peace. I hadn't touched it in years, but tonight I picked up a wrench. Not to fix the bike. Not yet. I just wanted to feel the weight of something honest in my hand. I looked around that garage, saw the workbench, the sawdust, the photo of Caroline tacked above the tool rack, and I said it aloud, to no one. They think I'm the story they can rewrite, but I wasn't a subplot in their little rescue drama. I was the ending they never planned for. I didn't sleep that night. The binder sat on the table like a wound still open. I kept flipping it closed, then opening it again. Like maybe the pages would change if I gave them time. But the numbers never lied. The names didn't shift. My own signature, forged in digital ink, stared back at me like a version of myself I never gave permission to exist. And still, the part that hurt wasn't the fraud. It was the photo. Tucked inside a receipt folder, behind tax records and wire transfers, was a Christmas card I never saw. From years ago, Caroline had written it, not me. To David, to Melissa, to the grandkids I never met. Her handwriting, round, soft, careful. The same way she wrote notes for the neighbors, or recipes for our daughter before she left home. Thinking of you always. Merry Christmas. From the lake house. Love, Mom. It was unopened, still sealed, but they kept it. Not for sentiment, but because it had fallen between pages they needed. I held that envelope like it was a glass ornament. Then I broke. I didn't cry much after Caroline passed. Not really. The funeral, maybe. A week after, when I found her hairbrush still warm from the sun. But I buried most of it. Men like me, we find things to fix, to lift, to organize. And we pretend that's grief processed. But that card shattered something I thought was done breaking. Because there was a time David carved me a Christmas ornament from pine. He was 9. Said it was supposed to be a star, but it looked more like a sun. Crooked, uneven, beautiful. We hung it anyway, front and center. Every year. I kept that thing for decades. Still have it. Wrapped in a rag in the back of the hall closet. And now, this? I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to beg for some explanation that made this make sense. But I couldn't do either. Because what Caroline had left in that card wasn't just holiday cheer. It was her last try. And they ignored it. Which meant everything else. Every lie. Every debt. Every manipulation. was never going to stop. Even death hadn't slowed them down. And that's when it clicked. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because Caroline deserved better than to be remembered in a sealed envelope. And I deserved better than to be erased by people who only remembered me when they ran out of money. That man, the one who made excuses, who stayed quiet, who ate leftovers alone every Christmas, he died with that unopened card. The man who was left, he had one job now. Make sure they never forget what it cost to treat love like a transaction. 3 days before Christmas, David called again. Same warm voice, same casual charm, like the last month hadn't happened. "Dad, listen," he said, "we've been thinking. It'd be great to have you over for Christmas dinner. Just us, family." He said family like it was a favor, like I should be grateful to be readmitted to the tribe. I let him talk, let him dig the hole a little deeper. Melissa even texted afterward, a heart emoji and a photo of the kids in matching pajamas. I responded with one word, coming. But this time, I wasn't showing up empty-handed. I called Mr. O'Donnell. "Time to deliver the envelope," I said. He knew what I meant. We met at my house. Same study, same fire crackling behind us. Inside the envelope was everything. The trail of receipts, the loan fraud, Melissa's spending, all of it printed clean, clipped, notarized. He sealed it while I watched. "You sure you want to hand it to him yourself?" he asked. I nodded. This has to happen where he feels it most, at the table he thought he owned. Then I called one more number, Sheriff's Office, Civil Enforcement Division. I gave them everything they needed, court filings, fraud evidence, preliminary seizure motions, quiet, procedural, airtight. And I asked one thing, Christmas Day delivery, around 6-page M. The man on the line paused. "You sure?" "I am." "Okay," he said, "we'll knock." That night, I couldn't sleep. But not from nerves, from clarity. I'd spent 15 years trying to be let back in. Now I was walking through the front door not as a father begging for crumbs, but as a man reclaiming his place. And not for revenge, for respect. Christmas morning came cold. Desert cold, dry, sharp, mean. I wore the coat Caroline bought me on our last trip together. Navy wool, silver buttons, still smelled like cedar from the closet. I drove slow, arrived at 4:30 sharp. The house was lit up like a catalog cover. Lights on the eaves, candles in the windows. Melissa opened the door with a perfect smile, lip-glossed and practiced. "Dad, come in. The kids are so excited." I stepped in. Warm air hit me hard. Cinnamon, rosemary, money. David came out of the kitchen in a sweater I probably paid for 5 Christmases ago. His smile was too wide. "Glad you made it," he said, patting my back like we'd always been close. I handed him the envelope. He blinked. "What's this?" "Your Christmas gift," I said. He looked at Melissa, then back at me. "You didn't have to." "I did." I walked into the dining room, took a seat at the head of the table. My seat, I realized. Melissa's parents weren't there this year. Just the 4 of us. The performance set. The illusion ready. Except this time, I was holding the script, and the curtain was about to rise. The dining room looked like something out of a magazine. Polished oak table, gold-rimmed plates, linen napkins folded like swans. Candles flickered in tall glass holders. A roast steamed gently on a silver tray. All of it perfect. All of it fake. Melissa sat across from me, smiling like her life wasn't about to implode. David poured wine like we were old friends, not 2 men with a sealed envelope sitting between us. I let them play their parts. Small talk, forced laughter. The kids came in and out, awkward around me, like they'd been prepped, told I was visiting from far away. They didn't know me. How could they? I'd been erased from their lives long before they could remember my name. David carved the roast. Passed plates. Melissa topped everyone's glasses. They kept waiting for me to break the silence, to offer the money, the gesture, the old man apology they thought was coming. But I just watched, Let them squirm a little. Then David cleared his throat. So, he said, smiling too tight, I heard you've had a rough time lately. Heard some things didn't go your way. Melissa leaned in, sympathetic eyes locked in place. We just want you to know, it doesn't change anything. We're family. We stick together. I nodded slowly. That's good to hear. David reached for the envelope. You didn't have to bring anything, Dad. I did, I said again. He opened it. At first he didn't react, just skimmed. Then his brow furrowed. Then again. Then he froze. Page 1, the fake loan agreement with my signature. Page 2, the luxury expenses charged under Melissa's name. Page 3, the fraud alerts. Page 4, the notarized letters from suppliers and subcontractors. Page 5, the forged wire transfer. His hands began to shake. Melissa leaned over to look, then yanked the packet from him. What is this? Proof, I said, of what you've done, of who you are. Melissa scoffed, mask cracking. You're insane. This is nothing. It's everything, I said. Everything I need. David stood up too fast. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing. He looked like a boy again. Not the man who'd smiled through a con. A boy caught with his hand in the drawer, unsure if he should lie or cry. Then came the knock at the door. 3 sharp hits. David froze. Melissa's face went pale. I sipped my wine. You should get that, I said. He didn't move, so I stood, slow, calm, and opened the door myself. 2 bailiffs stood on the porch, black coats, folders in hand. David Reeves? He didn't answer. One stepped forward, handed him a document. You've been served. Court orders for property seizure, asset freeze, and pending investigation of financial misconduct. Melissa shrieked, not screamed, shrieked, like the world was ending. Because for her, it was. David sat down, hard, eyes wide, mouth dry. And I went back to my seat, folded my napkin and said, Merry Christmas. David didn't speak, not at first. He just sat there, clutching the court order like it might catch fire. Melissa paced behind him, one hand in her hair, the other holding her phone like she could dial her way out of this. But no one was coming to save them. The bailiffs were polite, professional. They stepped inside and began cataloging high-value items. The Rolex on David's wrist, the artwork above the fireplace, the electronics. One even paused at the crystal wine decanter and nodded toward me. Gift from the guest? No, I said. That belongs here. Let them keep something to toast the end. Melissa finally broke. This is harassment. You set this up. You waited until Christmas, you bastard. I didn't flinch. I gave you every chance. I gave you years. You didn't care when you thought I had nothing. David stood, finally finding his voice. Quiet, but trembling. You don't have to do this, Dad. I looked him dead in the eye. You already did. He looked down. You used my name to get loans you couldn't pay. You signed my name on contracts I never saw. Melissa funneled money from the company for spa retreats and designer handbags while filing quarterly losses. You set up shell accounts and ran money through your father-in-law's business to hide the flow. I placed a second on the table, thicker. This one's for the DA. Already submitted, but I thought you should see what they're reading. He reached for it, hands shaking. And the third copy? I asked, voice calm. O'Donnell stepped in from the hallway, coat still on, with the IRS and the licensing board. David looked like he'd been hit. Melissa collapsed into a chair, mascara running. You tricked us, she said. No, I replied. I tested you. I looked around the room, the gold-trimmed edges of a house built on sand, the perfect decorations, the curated playlist humming faintly from hidden speakers, the children's stockings embroidered but empty. I gave you a chance to love me without a checkbook, I said. You failed. One of the bailiffs handed me a receipt for service. I tucked it into my coat. Melissa was on the phone now, shouting at someone about freezing access, about protecting what's left. David just sat there, quiet, like the first time he'd ever truly listened in his life. I walked to the door. The kids were nowhere in sight. probably sent upstairs. Probably for the best. David stood as I reached the threshold. "Dad, wait!" I turned. For a second, just one. I saw the boy, not the fraud, not the husband coached to manipulate, just the boy who once carved a wooden ornament with too much glue and a crooked smile. But that boy was gone. He'd sold himself to the highest bidder and hoped I'd never check the receipt. So I nodded once and walked out. The cold hit me before the door even closed behind me, but it felt clean, honest. Not like the heat inside, that choking warmth people crank up to cover tension. No, this was sharp and real and mine. Mr. O'Donnell followed me to the driveway. "You all right?" he asked, tucking the envelope deeper into his coat. "I'm fine," I said. And I was, for the first time in years. Across the street, lights started flicking on. Neighbors peeking out from behind curtains, murmuring on porches, pretending to tidy decorations while watching the spectacle unfold. The bailiffs were still inside. I saw shadows moving through the windows, cataloging, tagging, boxing. Melissa's shrill voice cut through the air again. Something about unlawful seizure. But the process had already begun. They could scream all they wanted. I didn't have to raise my voice. I had facts, paper, signatures, witnesses, and timing. Because what they didn't know, what David didn't even think to consider, was that I'd chosen today for a reason. Christmas. The day he thought would buy him sympathy. The day he assumed I'd be too sentimental to act. The day he thought the grandkids, the food, the lights, would soften me into silence. Instead, it became the day the lie cracked. It was poetic in a way. He'd spent 15 years ignoring every Christmas I spent alone. Tonight, he'd remember this one for the rest of his life. Melissa burst through the door behind us. No coat, no filter. "This is disgusting," she hissed. "You think this makes you look strong?" I turned to her, steady. "No, this makes me look done," she blinked. "You used to smile like you'd already won," I said. "Now you look behind you when you speak. That's not strength. That's fear." David appeared behind her, not yelling, not pleading, just standing. Ashen. He looked at O'Donnell. Then, at me. "You planned all of this," he said. Not a question, a realization. "I had to," I said. "You wouldn't stop until you drained me dry." "But we're family." "No," I said. "We were. You made sure that ended the moment you saw my worth, only in numbers." He looked down. He didn't fight. And just like that, the balance shifted. The man who once decided when I was included, who kept me out of his life for 15 years, now stood on his own doorstep, helpless, as I walked away. Not empty, but free. I got in my truck. O'Donnell followed, silent. Before I pulled out, I glanced at the rearview mirror. David stood alone now. No Melissa, no shield, no performance. Just a man staring at the cost of what he'd tried to steal. And for the first time since Caroline passed, I didn't feel like the abandoned one. I felt like the one who'd left the burning house behind, keys in hand, spine straight, past intact. By the time I got home, the story had already started spreading. Not in the papers, not yet, but in whispers, in group chats, in those little Facebook neighborhood groups where gossip moves faster than facts. Something happened at the Reeves house. Cops were there. Didn't his dad just come into money? Was that his father with the lawyer? I didn't have to say a word. People who'd ignored me for years now suddenly remembered how many favors I'd done, how many weekends I'd helped patch roofs or fix leaky pipes. "Good man," they said. "Always quiet. Always decent." It's funny. You can be invisible for years, but the second you stand up straight with evidence in your hands, they remember your name. And David? He became the story. The man with the big house and the silent scandals. Melissa didn't help herself. She screamed in the driveway when the second round of inventory happened, this time with neighbors watching from their lawns. "Stop filming," she shouted at a teenager across the street. That video made it online. You could see her dragging a suitcase down the steps, shoving past one of the bailiffs. ranting about entrapment and family betrayal. It got 30,000 views before sunset. By the next morning, I got a call from an old business partner in Tempe. "Jesus, John," he said, "you torch them." "I told the truth," I said. He laughed. "Yeah, but on Christmas, that's biblical." I didn't argue. It wasn't just the Reeves name that took a hit. It was their image, their shield of respectability. The fantasy they'd built for neighbors, clients, in-laws. Gone. And not by rumor, by record. The fraud filings became public after the new year. Melissa's name showed up as improperly affiliated with company expenditures. David's fake loan signatures were referred for criminal investigation. Real estate clients dropped him like a hot pan. Suppliers demanded back pay. The licensing board launched a review. They tried to spin it. Of course they did. Claimed I had a vendetta, that it was elderly confusion, that I'd been coached. But facts don't bend for PR. And the neighbors? They knew. They saw it. They heard it with their own ears. Melissa's jewelry was the first to go. Pawned or seized, no one knows. David sold the Audi a week later. Then, silence. The same silence they gave me for 15 years. Only this time, they were the ones sitting alone. And I was finally able to walk into the corner store without someone avoiding my eyes. Folks held doors again, asked about the lake house, treated me like someone whose story they finally understood. It wasn't about reputation. It was about being seen for who I really was, and not who they'd tried to erase.